Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are looking at a deeply sensitive and highly consequential development coming out of Iran, where reports of a mosque in Tehran being set on fire have sparked intense debate, fear, and speculation. This incident is not just about damage to a building, it touches the very core of the Islamic Republic's identity and raises urgent questions about whether such events could be used to justify even harsher military repression against protesters already facing severe crackdowns. In Iran, mosques are not only places of worship, but also powerful political and symbolic spaces. Since the 1979 revolution, the regime has closely tied its legitimacy to Islam and religious institutions. Any attack on a mosque, whether real, exaggerated, or misrepresented, carries enormous emotional weight. It can quickly be framed as an attack on faith itself rather than a political protest, and that framing matters greatly in how the state responds. Reports surrounding the Tehran mosque fire are still contested. State media narratives emphasize desecration, chaos, and threats to Islamic values, while opposition voices question the circumstances, responsibility, and even the authenticity of the claims. In such an information environment, truth becomes fragmented, and perception often becomes more powerful than facts. What matters for the regime is not necessarily who did it, but how it can be used. For the Iranian authorities, moments like these present an opportunity. When protests are framed as economic or political, they risk gaining sympathy from broader segments of society. But when protests are portrayed as violent, sacrilegious, or anti-Islamic, the regime can shift the narrative dramatically. It can argue that the state is not suppressing dissent, but defending religion, order, and national identity. This shift in narrative is critical because it allows the state to justify the deployment of more aggressive tools. Military units, including the Irq and Basij, can be mobilized under the pretext of protecting holy sites. Emergency measures can be introduced, curfews tightened, and lethal force rationalized as a necessary response to extremism, rather than popular anger. Historically, the Iranian state has repeatedly used symbolic red lines to escalate repression. Attacks on religious symbols, national flags, or senior clerics are treated very differently from street protests or strikes. The burning of a mosque, even if isolated, can be elevated into a national crisis that demands an extraordinary response. This is where the risk lies for protesters. For many ordinary Iranians, the protests are not about religion. They are about economic hardship, lack of freedom, corruption, and a political system that feels increasingly disconnected from daily life. However, when a mosque is set on fire, willingly or not, the focus shifts. The regime can claim that the movement has been hijacked by hostile forces seeking to destroy Islam itself. This framing also plays well with the regime's core supporters. While public dissatisfaction is widespread, there remains a segment of society that responds strongly to religious symbolism. By presenting the protests as an existential threat to Islam, the state can re-energize loyalists who may have been passive or uncertain. This can deepen divisions within society and isolate protesters further. Another crucial factor is the international dimension. Iran's leadership is acutely aware of global scrutiny. When protests are peaceful, international pressure tends to grow. But when violence and religious desecration are highlighted, the regime can argue to foreign audiences that it is dealing with unrest, riots, or terrorism. This complicates international responses and can reduce the likelihood of unified pressure. At the same time, incidents like this increase the danger for protesters on the ground. Security forces often respond not only with arrests but with collective punishment. Neighborhoods can be sealed off, internet access cut, and mass detentions carried out. The justification becomes simple. Extraordinary threats require extraordinary measures. It is also important to consider the possibility of manipulation. In past unrest, there have been allegations that provocations were staged or allowed to happen in order to discredit protest movements. While such claims are difficult to verify, the pattern of narrative exploitation is well established. Whether or not this particular fire was engineered, it can still be weaponized politically. For protesters, this creates a strategic dilemma. Peaceful demonstrations risk being ignored or crushed slowly, while any incident of violence risks immediate escalation. The burning of a mosque, intentional or accidental, crosses a line that the regime is eager to highlight. This puts activists in a defensive position, forced to deny, explain, or distance themselves from acts they may have had nothing to do with. The emotional impact of such incidents should not be underestimated. Religion remains deeply woven into Iranian culture, even among those critical of the state. Seeing a mosque in flames can shock and alienate people who might otherwise sympathize with calls for reform. This emotional shock is precisely what the state relies on to regain narrative control. Looking ahead, the key question is whether this incident will mark a turning point. Will it be used as justification for a new phase of militarization in the streets, with heavier weapons, more checkpoints, and broader use of force? Or will public skepticism about official narratives limit its impact? Much depends on how convincingly the state can sell its version of events. Another factor is the response of religious figures. If prominent clerics echo the state's line and condemn protesters broadly, repression is more likely to intensify. If, however, some religious voices call for restraint, investigation, or dialogue, it could limit how far the state can go. Silence, too, will be telling. The role of social media is also critical. Despite censorship, alternative narratives often circulate quickly. Videos, eyewitness accounts, and counterclaims can challenge official statements. However, during moments of heightened tension, the state often responds by cutting internet access, creating an information vacuum where its narrative dominates. For the military and security forces themselves, incidents like this are used to reinforce loyalty. Troops are told they are defending Islam and the nation, not suppressing fellow citizens. This psychological framing is crucial in maintaining discipline and willingness to use force. The more sacred the cause appears, the easier it is to justify harsh actions. From a broader perspective, the burning of a mosque highlights how fragile the situation in Iran has become. When symbols are attacked or claimed to be attacked, it signals a breakdown of trust and a dangerous escalation in the struggle between state and society. It suggests that the conflict is moving beyond policy disagreements into a battle over identity and legitimacy. For protesters, the challenge will be to keep their message clear and focused. Avoiding actions that can be framed as attacks on religion is not just a moral choice, but a strategic necessity. The regime thrives on confusion and moral outrage, and incidents like this hand it powerful ammunition. In conclusion, the reported burning of a Tehran mosque has the potential to significantly fuel state military repression against protesters. Whether through genuine outrage or calculated narrative control, the regime can use this event to justify harsher measures, rally supporters, and suppress dissent more aggressively. The coming days will reveal whether this incident becomes a footnote or a catalyst for a far more severe crackdown. What is clear is that in Iran's current climate, symbols matter as much as numbers, and a single image can change the trajectory of an entire movement.